Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Oh, there I am, spotlighted. Let me unspotlight from my side. I like to look at you guys instead of me. Hi. How are you? I've been listening to you all morning. So yeah, Tina, I heard you this morning. I knew she'd love that. Actually, I thought it was very good. Not that you asked for feedback, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. I loved that as you were reading, you then paused and asked a question of inner wisdom, and then came back to reading and then paused and asked a question of inner wisdom. I love, 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 love that. If you continue in that way, it is possible that since you only teach for half an hour a week, that you won't be able to share everything, right? Like maybe you'll get in the groove of doing that every day. You're not going to be able to share it all, so you're going to have to pick what you share. But I think it's a great way to go through NTI. Um, uh, I will also tell you that, you asked Holy Spirit, how do I know it's you? I did the exact same thing when I started, right? I was just as scared that it was my imagination, just as scared that I would be listening to ego than Holy Spirit, right? And what Holy Spirit told me is, you will know me by my consistency. And I found that to always be true. Holy Spirit was very, very consistent. And of course, the more you write with Spirit, the more you recognize its consistency. And you asked that question. Of course, you asked this of me also in Messenger. I'm just going to share the answer because obviously I don't think the question is yours alone, right? They all have the same question, which is why I'm talking about it. If it was just you, I'd do this with you privately, but it's not just you. So, that question was, how do I know the difference? How do I know it's Holy Spirit and not my imagination? And what I told Tina in Messenger is I said, don't even try to make that determination. And the reason you don't try to make that determination is because every time ego is going to tell you it is your imagination. It's like you're giving ego that opening, right? So don't try and discern, is it really Holy Spirit or is it my imagination? Instead, just discern, does this sound like Holy Spirit or does it sound like ego? If it sounds like Holy Spirit, trust it. And obviously, what happens for anybody who intentionally wants to hear Holy Spirit and regularly goes about asking questions and getting answers, right? Is it gets the Holy Spirit, I'm going to say it gets easier and easier, or better and better, or deeper and deeper. I think Ken Wapnick, when talking about Helen Schuckman, once said, he said that if you read the beginning of the text, which was, her original writing, there's some stuff in I don't remember if it's the first 6 chapters or whatever, but the first portion of the text, there's some stuff in there that isn't as pure as later, right? He said it's kind of like if you went out to a well that hasn't been pumped, a well that you pump that hasn't been pumped in a long time. So when you first start pumping it, maybe only a drop comes out, and then maybe some of the water that comes out in the beginning is rusty water, right? But if you just keep pumping it, eventually there's a nice, clear flow. And so that's why in the beginning, you don't want to worry too much about, am I getting it right? Probably you aren't 100% on. None of us are, right? And ego is just going to say, even when you, especially when it's very, very right, ego is going to say, no, 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 no. Like, the more ego says, it's not it, it probably is it, so just keep going for it, just like you demonstrated this morning. Just keep going for it, and everything will work out in the end, as Ramana Maharshi used to say. I don't know if I saw Anne a minute ago. There she's over. I see her shoulder. That's why I see Anne's shoulder. I see like this. What I have to say to Anne is, I didn't know I was supposed to wipe out my suitcase after I unpacked it. Nobody ever told me that. I'm listening to Anne, and she's talking about, oh, did I unpack all the way and wipe out my suitcase? And I'm like, what? I don't think I've ever wiped out my suitcase. Now I'm going to have to go home, open up all my suitcases and wipe them out so I'm not guilty. No, it's been good being with all of y'all today. I enjoy it when it happens that way. Of course, that means I was cleaning, you know. But it's fun listening to you while I clean. So although I wasn't wiping out my suitcase, I actually was wiping down my cabinets when you said that, which is kind of funny. We are here for 7 steps to awakening and out of the stillness. Actually, something just occurred to me before I do that. Yeah, something just occurred to me. So before I do that, I just want to talk about something else. Last time I was here, which was a couple weeks ago, I talked about the fact that the I am presence is ego. And it occurred to me later that it might be good if I made some more clarifications about that. So I'd like to go back and just make some more clarifications about that. You know, ego obviously is just a word, a sound, ego, E-G-O, ego, right? Ultimately, it doesn't mean anything. No sound does. But we give those sounds meanings. And sometimes meanings change in different sentences, right? In different contexts. Sometimes they just change among different people. So I want to talk to you about what the word ego has come to mean to me, because it didn't mean this in the beginning. For me, in the beginning, the ego was the equivalent of the wrong mind, right? Which now I might call the lower ego, the wrong mind. So, you know, that guilt, fear, unworthiness, selfishness, self-will, self-centered, jealous, envious, dishonest, you know, just all that stuff, right? Rejectable, unlovable, all that stuff is what I would call the lower ego. I used to call that the ego, the wrong mind. But my definition of ego has changed. My definition of ego now is just a sense of self. It doesn't matter what that sense of self is. So in the beginning, my sense of self might be unworthy, stupid scum of the earth, right? That might be my sense of self. And eventually I transcend that. But the sense of self itself is still there. Maybe it's, I think probably the next thing that came for me was kind of I'm like a purified person. I'm a person, but I have a purified mind, right? But the person itself is a sense of self. So that's the level, you could say that's the level of ego that I'm at then. And then eventually I came to see the person as a concept and not a truth. And the I am presence is where my identification rests. That's still a sense of self. So now that's what the word ego means to me. No ego would mean no sense of self at all, right? No ego would mean no sense of self at all. So what's interesting then, if the, I'm going to call it the highest level of ego, forgive these friggin' words, but you guys all know how words are, right? If the highest level of ego is the I am presence, it can be almost entirely, if not maybe for some people entirely, right-minded. Right? It could be entirely right-minded. But it still has that sense of self to it. So when I use the word ego, I'm not always referring to the wrong mind, like once upon a time I was. And I think that's what I wanted to clarify. Ego just means sense of self. The sun has come out for a minute. I don't think it'll last long. There's too many clouds, but I had to lower my blinds a little bit so I could see y'all. So let me just pause for a moment and see if anybody has anything they want to say about that topic before we begin something entirely new. Okay, George.
So by that definition, virtually everybody, even those that we consider to be awakened, are still in this aspect of ego. They still have a sense of personhood. And is that what you're saying?
You know what? I think that is probably true. Now, not everybody, you said virtually everybody, right? Virtually everybody. But I think that is probably true. And this is why, certain teachers like Bernadette Roberts, as an example, David Hawkins, as an example, Angelo DeLullo, as an example, right? They talk about, even Adyashanti talks about no self, right? So when they have transcended the self entirely, that's when, as the saying goes, the ego is dead, right? Some people might say, how could the ego be entirely right-minded? I think probably the way to look at that is that the Holy Spirit, using the language of the Course and NTI, the Holy Spirit is the correction to the ego, right? Like Holy Spirit never would have had to appear if ego didn't appear first, right? Unnecessary. So what's happening is at that point, the ego is listening entirely to the correction, is a way of wording that. Is really tuned into the correction and is paying attention to the correction. But when there is no sense of self at all, when the sense of self is completely transcended, there is also no ego.
So Nisargadatta, who wrote many books and taught for a long time, in his last book, he said, "Forget everything that I've shared with you." So he made that transition to no self at that point.
Yes.
So that really makes sense when Michael Langford says, there's only a very few really awakened people.
Right.
That's what he's talking about, that have actually accomplished or transcended to the no self.
Yes. Yes. It's the difference between the second principle of God and the first principle of God, right? All right, let's see, Jim.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you.
Would awareness, just total pure awareness, be that state of no self? Perfect awareness.
Yeah. Yes. I only have at this point glimpses of what I think is probably the no self experience. So when I answer this question, take it with that little caveat, right? Be better to ask someone who has already transcended the self entirely than to ask me.
Yeah.
But when I have these glimpses, what the term I've been using lately with some friends that I've been writing with is that they're like merging experiences. So for example, let's say I'm looking at a leaf in that moment. What happens is there becomes so much awareness of the leaf. There's no awareness of a self.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's not a observer looking at a leaf. See that? The observer looking at a leaf is the second principle of God.
Mhm.
Right? That observer looking at a leaf, that's a little bit of still a separation, even if you understand that you have the same essence and that you're unity, right? There's still an observer looking at the leaf. But when it merges and there's just awareness of the leaf, the observer is no longer there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had similar experiences, and in those experiences, there was no breakdown, there was no separation.
No separation.
There was no thought,
Yeah.
but yet, then this is a word to use afterwards, but nothing was missing, but
Right.
yet there was no things, so, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else want to say anything before we move on? All right, then let's get into what we came here for then. Is it okay if I have a drink first, though? I'm thirsty already. It's funny because I'm alone this week. Ron is traveling, Mom is traveling. It's just me and Ellie. And as a result, I've been spending a lot more time in contemplation. But the funny thing is, when I contemplate, the time flies by and I forget to drink. So I've had headaches this week from dehydration. It's like, how can I learn to contemplate and drink at the same time? I've had 2 days of headaches this week from being just so absorbed in contemplation that I forget to drink. So today I'm really trying to get back into the drinking habit. Because anybody who knows me knows that my body is very sensitive to dehydration. So I got to pay attention to that. All right, so going to out of the stillness, it looks like we're going to start on 433 today. 433 in 7 Steps to Awakening says, the external phenomena are utterly useless. That's the quote. The external phenomena are utterly useless. All right. So let's look at how I contemplated that. This is a good question. What purpose does the world have for the true self? The world can have no purpose for the true self because the true self is completely unaffected by the world. Without effect, there cannot be purpose. The mind needs or craves entertainment. Self does not. True self does not. The mind needs or craves love and approval. The true self does not. The mind needs or craves a sense of safety and security. The true self does not. The true self is changeless and needs or craves nothing. Therefore, the world has no purpose for the true self. So it's kind of interesting because just before reading the quote, I mentioned to you all that, in the last couple of days, I've been spending more time in contemplation because I'm alone and I can. And as a result, I haven't been drinking as much. I've had headaches the last couple of days. And so I point out, I gotta remember to drink water, right? There are 2 times that I forget to drink water. One is contemplation, and the other seems to be moving. It seems like every time I move, I forget to drink water, get all busy with the packing, the moving, the unpacking. So those are my primary primary headache times. And then I read this quote that says, external phenomena are utterly useless. Well, isn't water external phenomena? Right? And didn't I just say, you know, I need to remember to drink this water so I don't get these dehydration headaches? Well, it's interesting because my contemplation didn't go to, are external phenomena useless to the body? Because the body itself is an external phenomena, right? We all know the body needs to eat, it needs to drink, it needs to sleep, it needs to go to the bathroom, you know, it needs to be kept reasonably warm, sometimes even reasonably cool if you happen to be like in India or somewhere where it gets really, really hot, right? So the body appears to have needs. The question that my contemplation went to is, what does the true self need from external phenomena? Look, the throat needs water right now. It's dry. But what does the true self need from the world? What purpose does the world have, or what purpose does external phenomena have for the true self? The world can have no purpose for the true self because the true self is completely unaffected by the world. Without effect, there cannot be purpose. Now, this first sentence is really interesting. The mind needs, and then I put in parentheses, craves, entertainment. Do you know that's a true statement? That, you know, it doesn't necessarily need TV, although most of us in some form or another watch TV, even if we do it on our laptops. Doesn't really need books, doesn't need any of that, but it sure does seem to need that thought stream, doesn't it? And what is that thought stream but entertainment? Have you ever looked? Isn't the mind just being entertained by the thought stream? I can't remember what show I saw, some movie a long time ago, about a guy who was shipwrecked and was on a raft. You know, I've seen a few movies like that, so I don't remember which one it was, but he's on a raft by himself floating in the ocean. And what I remember really stood out to me is one thing he felt like he had to do was find something to entertain the mind, or he felt he would go crazy. I can't remember what he did, if he started making up puzzles and doing puzzles with his brain, right? Just in his brain, because he had nothing to write with. That clearly his body needed water, his body needed food. And in fact, I think he came up with a way to make water, right? By how he had some like plastic thing where he could make water. Some of you guys probably saw the movie too. He was able to get the water. I don't know if he was able to get the food or if he was just rescued before he starved to death, because, you know, it takes longer to starve to death than it does to die of thirst. But I think he got some water. But he started making up stuff to do with his mind because he felt like he needed to entertain the mind, or he would have gone crazy. Now, most of us aren't put in that situation where we recognize that mental need, but typically our minds are naturally entertained anyway, right? We have plenty of things going on to entertain our mind. And of course, we all know this has become one of the biggest mind entertainers in our lifetime, right? You see, I mean, can you go anywhere without seeing somebody doing this? You can't go anywhere, right? So the mind seems to need entertainment. But does the true self? Check that out sometime. You know, if you're sitting, let's say, in a long meditation, whatever a long meditation is to you, if you usually sit for an hour, maybe it's 2 hours or 3 hours. You know, whatever a long meditation is for you, longer than you're accustomed to is what I mean. You will probably see the mind seeking out entertainment, wanting to grab onto thought, maybe even wanting to get up and go somewhere and do something. But when you see the mind seeking for entertainment, check awareness in that moment. Does it need entertainment? Look and see, find out for yourself. You know, we won't have the time to do that now. To really do that, it would take a longer meditation. But just look and see, we know the mind needs the entertainment. We know that. Does awareness need entertainment? The answer that I came up with, of course, was no. The mind needs or craves love and approval. We all know that's true, right? I mean, how do you think Tina would have felt if I had said, Tina, your teaching today sucked? How would you have felt, Tina? Good or bad? Bad, 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 right?
Bad, bad.
But let's all pretend like that we're in that position. Let's pretend like that somebody that we respect, doesn't matter who, is telling us that in some way we've done something wrong, not well enough. You know, feel that for a moment. Feel that disapproval from somebody you respect. We all agree the mind is not happy with this, right? It doesn't feel good, right? But now check. Does awareness, does it care? Is it involved in wanting approval? Is it anybody able to get to an answer? Okay, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, when I went to awareness, what happened to that judgment or whatever you want to call it was I was the observer of the physical sensation of that. You know, that was there, but the thoughts weren't there.
Yes.
And there was also, of course, a broader awareness of sights and sounds and things like that also there. So this was just one component of an observation, so to speak. So
Yeah.
that was my experience.
Yeah, it's neutrally watching the show. In this case, the show of mind feeling bad because it wasn't approved of. But it's not on the stage, right? It's
Yeah.
neutrally watching the show.
And there's no thought.
Yeah.
There's no
thought
judgment
anyway.
about that. It's just
Right.
there, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So awareness, the true self, does not need any love or approval. Whenever we think we want love or approval, even from our children, our spouse, our parents, our respected teachers, whoever, we're actually identified with mind. Right? So the mind needs or craves entertainment. True self does not. The mind needs or craves love and approval. True self does not. Here's a good one. The mind needs or craves a sense of safety and security. Now that's a very basic need for the mind. A very basic need. Maybe the most basic need. And in fact, we've been told by some spiritual teachers that when that final awakening to no self comes, what does mind do? Doesn't it panic? Because it's about to die. It panics. Its most basic need is completely threatened in that awakening process. But how would we ever go through that awakening process unless the true self did not share that same basic need? Right? The true self is able to go through the panic and come out the other side. So the mind needs or craves a sense of safety and security, but the true self does not. The true self is changeless and needs or craves nothing. Therefore, the world has no purpose for the true self, or as this quote says, the external phenomena are utterly useless. In other words, that sentence is said from the perspective of the first principle of God, the no self, right? I mean, after all the water I drink, I'm certain the next thing I'm going to need when this teaching is done is a toilet. That's the level of body, right? That's the level of body. What we want to do is tune in as much as we can to the true self, awareness, and notice that it has no external needs or wants, that it just is with everything. And that's 433. Which takes us to 434. So from the 7 steps to awakening, there is but one consciousness, which is pure, invisible, and the subtlest of the subtle, tranquil, which is neither the world nor its activities. There is but one consciousness, which is pure, invisible, the subtlest of the subtle, tranquil, which is neither the world nor its activities. And here's how I contemplated this in 434 and out of the stillness. How many things are directly known? And the answer was 1. And of course, previous questioning, if you've been, going through this with me, previous questioning has noticed that the world is not directly known. It's known through the body. The body is not directly known. It's known through the mind. And even the mind is observed. That the only thing that's directly known, that has no separation, is awareness itself. It's one thing, right? Awareness itself is one thing. How many things are directly known? 1. What is that? In this case, I called it beingness. What is mind? I said thoughts, attention, conditioning, and beliefs. These seem to make up mind. And by the way, when I'm answering this, I'm actually, one thing about Out of the Stillness, everything you're looking at, we read it, not so quickly. We do a lot of talking about it, but everything that you're looking at, I paused and looked, and in that moment gave an answer, right? So when the question came, what is mind? I looked. See thoughts. I notice attention. And there's definitely some conditioning here and some beliefs, right? So this is what I listed in that moment as mind. It says of these, okay, so of thoughts, attention, conditioning, and beliefs, of these, what is most directly experienced? So I looked at that, and what I came up with was attention. Like I could see that attention is more directly experienced than a thought. I could see that attention is more directly experienced than even a belief, right? Attention felt closer, more intimate. You know, it's through attention that I see a thought. It's through attention that I experience a belief. So they're one removed. Attention felt closer. So of these, what is most directly experienced? Attention seems to be most directly experienced. Thoughts, beliefs, and conditioning are experienced through attention. So the next question that came, can attention be separated from I? Or is attention an inherent aspect of self? I looked and I said, yes, attention can be separated from I, right? Attention can be seen. Like I can see attention was lost in thought. Attention can be redirected, right? Attention can be shifted to the knee, shifted to the chest, shifted to the crown of the head. But I cannot be seen. I cannot be directed. I cannot be redirected. It simply is. So I am not attention. And in fact, as I really started looking at attention a lot, I started seeing attention as more like a flashlight beam, where I is more like daylight, right? You can't point at daylight, right? It's everywhere right now. I mean, you know, assuming you're where it's daytime, it's everywhere, right? But a flashlight beam, you can point and you can see what the flashlight beam is focusing on. So what is this I that's able to be aware of attention? You know, years later, I was actually in a dyad with Anne. When I came to see that not only could I see attention, but I see or am aware of consciousness itself, aware of being conscious. Let me word it that way, since words can be tricky. Like, there's the flashlight beam. I'm aware of the flashlight beam. That's attention. There's the daylight awareness, right? That's more spread out. But I'm aware of that. That's how I know the difference between attention and awareness, broad awareness. Because I actually friggin' see both. I mean, look, right now, if you put your attention somewhere, you know, I'm just putting mine on where my jeans are touching my waistline, right? That feeling right there. It could be anything that you're putting your attention on. I can see that my attention is there. I can also see that awareness is more broad than that, or consciousness, I'll call it, is more broad than that. What sees all of that? That I cannot see. I can't see that. I can see attention and I can see consciousness. But I cannot see what sees consciousness. And yet I know it's I because I see consciousness. Anybody have anything they want to share about that? Yeah, Tina.
You really helped this. What you're talking about reminds me of the little mini strokey thing I had a couple weeks ago. Of that, I talked about that in the last one. It's like I couldn't put my finger on what it felt like, but I could sense that I was out here watching. I could see my body and my mind and all that going on, and so I didn't really know what to call that. But whatever that is, seems to be the thing that we're talking
Yes.
about. It's consciousness.
Yeah, and it doesn't have, I mean, people give it names, but it doesn't have a name, right? I mean, it really, how can it have a name? I mean, I is a good name, as long as you're not confusing I with mind or I with consciousness. I mean, because if I was Tina, I mean, Tina said something like this. I saw the mind telling the body to move and the body not moving, right? She used the word I, right? So I is a good name for it.
It was very strange. I don't know how you walk around in that kind of dimension. I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the more we can back up from the world and become aware that we are the awareness that's aware rather than the mind or the body or even the attention, the more we will experience peace. Because as we saw in the previous quote, because that which we are is clearly not affected. It's just aware of everything, right? It's just the neutral audience member, right? It's not on the stage anywhere at any level. So what does it have to get upset about? I mean, can it even get upset? The mind can clearly get upset, right? The subtlest of the subtle, it calls it here. Let's listen to this quote again. Now, there is but one consciousness. It's using the word consciousness, and this is what sucks about words, because I'm saying we can see consciousness. So same word, different meaning, right? A different place. But there is but one consciousness, which is pure, invisible. Do you guys agree it was invisible? Do you agree you could not see it? The subtlest of the subtle. Could there be anything more subtle than that? Tranquil. Neither the world nor its activities. Thought would be an activity in the world. Emotion would be an activity in the world. Even consciousness itself although subtle, is an activity in the world. This is none of those things. This is beyond them all. This is aware of them all. There's not much else to say about that. Except if we never sat down to look at it, would we ever notice it? No. If we never intended to pay attention and look for it, look towards it, we would never even notice it, although it's clearly always here. All right, let's do one more. Let's move on to 435. I'm excited to do this one because this is about the doer, and that's what everybody's been talking about today. So now I get to play along with everybody else. Number 435 in 7 Steps to Awakening. There is no such thing as creation. You are neither the doer of actions nor the enjoyer of experiences. What was it you were talking about, Anne? You were talking about, I think Rhoda was too, pleasure, pain, right? You're talking about that. So this is pointing to that as well. There is no such thing as creation. You are neither the doer of actions nor the enjoyer of experiences. You are the all, ever at peace, unborn, and perfect. That's the quote. So let's look at how I contemplated this. Number 435. Is the true self. And now we know that when we talk about the true self, right this second, what these words mean is that which is aware of consciousness. Okay? Is the true self the doer of actions? Can you say that which is aware of consciousness does anything? Doesn't doing happen through body and mind? But does that which is aware of consciousness do anything? I answered no, it is present and it is aware, but it does not do. Next question. Does the true self enjoy experiences? Boy, howdy. I mean, I can feel happiness. I can see happiness. But can I honestly say that that which sees the happiness is happy? I actually can't, because it's too subtle to have, happy is, happiness, although it's very light compared to depression, right? Happy is very light compared to depression. The truth is, even happiness is heavy compared to that subtlest of the subtle, which has no weight to it at all. I can be fully aware of happiness, but I cannot say that that which is fully aware of happiness is happy. I can see that I can see happy. That's how I can report that, quote, I am happy. I can report it because I can see it. So I would have to say the true self is not the enjoyer of experiences. It does not suffer or enjoy. It simply is. Next question. Is the true self what you are? Yes. I couldn't have answered these questions otherwise. I couldn't have looked from my own experience, observed, being aware of the fact that I am aware of happiness, but that I, which is aware of happiness, it doesn't have any weight to it. It doesn't even have the weight of happiness to it. I couldn't have answered unless that's what I am. I couldn't have checked and verified unless that's what I am. So is the true self what you are? Yes, this has been seen and verified. So are you the doer of actions? It's not asking me, is the body the doer of actions? It's not even asking me, is the mind the doer of actions? It's asking me if I'm the doer of actions. Hell no. Not when my attention is focused on that which I really am. There's no way I can say I'm the doer of actions. In fact, you know what else? I don't have a single idea, because that I has no ideas. I don't have a single idea about how action even comes about. I'm just watching everything. I'm just aware of everything. End of story. Yes, Len.
This is a really good exercise to be experiencing this together. And was it Nisargadatta who said everything just happens?
Mm.
And there, implicit in that is there's nothing doing anything.
Right.
Things just happen.
Well, and if you shift back to that I, which is aware of everything, I mean, can you guys all see you don't have any idea about how things happen? You don't have any idea about how thoughts appear. You don't have any idea about why bodies move. You don't have any idea about anything. So a great way to express it would be things are just happening. Yes, Michelle.
I kind of had a sort of same experience as Tina had a year ago. I was hospitalized, but there was a lot of pain prior to it, a lot of weird things happening with the body. And I went into awareness of it while it was happening. So then once I was in the hospital, my husband's like, you gotta go. And it's like, there wasn't that awareness that I was just watching it. So there wasn't any meeting to see, like, I gotta do something, something's gotta change. And so I went in and I was just watching the whole time. I was there a week and I was just watching the body and things they were giving me ice baths. They were doing all kinds of stuff. And I was just observing that I wasn't this body. And I had no control of what was going on with the body, but it was very bizarre. I mean, it's very peaceful. And they said, one of the guys came in and he goes, oh, I'm so happy to be taking care of you today because you're a legend in the hospital. I'm like, okay. She says, yeah, you came in half dead and you never complain about anything. And I'm like, yeah, well, and then after I came home and all I could do was sit and look at the clouds, that was it. Like I couldn't read a book. I couldn't do anything. I just sit and look at the clouds.
Yeah, I've had a couple of what I would call sickness-based experiences that are like that. So I understand the first is when I was a child. I remember laying in the nurse's office. I don't know how old I was in elementary school. And there was just this pure awareness. Like I heard the other kids, going down the hallway to recess. I heard the nurse talking on the phone. But I can't say I felt anything, even though I know I was very, very sick. I had just, somehow shifted out enough to lay there and just be completely at rest, completely peaceful, completely aware. And then the other time is when they were doing a biopsy on my breast. And the doctor said, lay very still. And the only way I could think to lay very still and let him do what he was doing was just to shift completely into awareness. And that's somehow what I did, you know.
That's
So,
what I had
yeah,
practiced doing. And I can say that at that time, you know, death was very close. You know, they're like, if you hadn't come in, you would have been dead the next morning. And it was like, it was just like a total letting go of, yeah, I understand that the people around me, it would have hurt them. You know, that would have been hard. But for myself, it was like, okay, you know,
Yeah.
it was just a total letting go of this form. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I think that's it for today. So we're just at March, where are we, 13, which means I'll be here next week. So next week we'll continue forward, and it has been wonderful spending the day with y'all. Bye.
Thank you, Regina.